the GDP, Canada versus the US. Okay. Canada versus the US, we see the Q2 numbers. Canada comes in at 2.1% versus the US at 3.1%.
Okay, so why is this important?
So GDP is the measure of economic activity in a country. Okay, and so it's establishing what is the growth of that economic activity. It's not a perfect calculation, but it's a calculation. It's one of the best indicators that we have of the overall growth in the economy.
Okay, so economic activity. Maybe spell that out exactly what that means.
I mean, think of like all the aggregate goods and services of the economy. Okay, and what was that compared to last year? Okay, and so this is saying that it's 2.1% higher than the same quarter in the previous year. Okay, and it's saying that the U.S. at 3.1%. Okay, now a lot of people will look at if the U.S. aggregate growth is bigger, that somehow means that they are more productive. Okay, but we've broken this down. We broke this down in the boot camp. Sometimes it's like, if one government is rolling a 2% deficit, so if their deficit is 2% of their GDP, and another government is rolling a deficit that's 6% of their GDP, it's like they might look more productive in the short term, but in the long term, it might not be that great of an idea. Okay, but GDP, often the criticism with GDP is like, that's aggregate GDP. In Canada, we have a problem with GDP per capita. Okay, and people are astute to this, like GDP per capita, and so we put up the GDP per capita because the discussion always goes to GDP per capita. Okay, so this would be, all of that, economic activity. Okay, so we're talking the $3 trillion of economic activity per year, and divide it by the population, 41 million. Okay,
yeah, which, I mean, we've seen extraordinary growth in our population over the last, short few years here. Like, what is that, like 2%, an extra 500,000 people per year?
It's like almost 4 million people in 5 years. Like it's pretty crazy.
That's insane.
It's pretty crazy, the population growth. Okay, and so now in this table, just for comparison purposes, like converted it both to USD.
Sure.
Okay, and so we see Canada, starting out, back in Q1 of 2021 at 51,000 USD per person. Okay, and now we look out today, Q2 2024 at 54,000 per person. Okay, comparatively, look at the U.S. It's at 63,000 a person Q1 2021 and 68,000 per person today. Okay, so how does that make people, what is the overall feeling? How people are feeling economically,
right?
Most people, the working class, it's like they will relate to GDP per capita. It's
right.
Probably a better economic indicator of, like, if you're asking someone how they're feeling, GDP per capita, it's kind of their slice of the pie, if you will, right? And interestingly enough, if you look at median wages, if you just look at median wages and compare it to GDP per capita, it trends pretty well, right? Like they're pretty highly correlated, okay? But a lot of people will see this and they'll say that, okay, everything's getting more expensive. It's 51 to 54, okay, versus 63 to 68. And they'll start to say, it's like, well, that means the Canadian economy is crap. There's no opportunity for me to make money here, okay? Because my slice of the pie is kind of staying the same and everything around me is getting more expensive, okay? That's kind of how Canadians feel. But they're missing the point that there is an opportunity, and the opportunity is generally based more as an investor. Your opportunity as an investor, especially in the stock market, when you're looking at big name companies, is more correlated to aggregate GDP. Okay, And I'm going to give like the really extreme example. People say, oh, that's impossible. If the average, if GDP per capita is not high enough, how could these companies make money, right? I'm going to show people like the extreme circumstance of how. Okay, forget about Canada and the U.S. in the first world, 54 and 68,000.
Sure, and people have to understand like there's a bell curve. There's people at the extreme low end, extreme high end. This is kind of the middle of the road,
sure.
Right?
Yeah. GDP per capita. It's like, let's go to the third world.
Sure.
Okay?
Let's
go
check
to the
it out.
third world. GDP per capita in India, $2,400 US. Okay. Not 24,000, just to be clear, $2,400 US, right?
Yeah. So lots and lots of people going after size of the pie, right? One piece of pie.
A 20x difference, right?
Yeah.
On this, right? That's a 2022 number, but massive, reduction on what the slice of the pie is. And of course, like, how does the average person in, the average working class individual in India feel? Poor. Like, they feel poor. Like, what is their purchasing power? It's like they're poor, right? So if your thesis is that obviously the big companies can't make money in India because the GDP per capita is low, it's like, I'm sorry, I'm about to break your heart. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not how the machine works. Okay. So for perspective, here's the largest Canadian companies by market cap. You have RBC at $233 billion, TD at $143 billion, Shopify $121 billion, Enbridge just under $120 billion, and so far down the list. Okay, you keep going. So if big companies couldn't make money if GDP per capita was low, what would Indian stocks look like? They would look low. But just look up the big companies in India. Okay. Reliance Industry, okay, the big conglomerate, produce energy and other things, $318 billion. So just to recap, the average, the GDP per capita in Canada is 54,000 per person USD. In India, it's 2,400 per person, but our largest company is $233 billion, and their largest company is $318 billion. And this is in Canadian dollars. This is like that's a dollar for dollar. I'm not comparing. It's not 318 billion rupees. It's $318 billion. Okay. And so the mistake is people think that if GDP per capita is low, then the big companies can't make any money. There's no opportunity for me to invest. That's not the case. It's like, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the big companies are really good at making money from poor people.
That clutches pearls. What do you mean?
So the big company, as an individual, how I'm feeling when I see GDP per capita lag, I'm upset. You know what I mean? I might be upset. I might be upset at the government. I might be frustrated in how I feel. But if I'm sitting around at the board of directors table at a big company, if you're sitting around at RBC or Enbridge, it's like, you want a bigger pie, because they're not just making money from rich people, they're making money from poor people, and they just need the pie to be bigger, and their slice, their market share, it just gets bigger with it. Okay. And think about this for a second. Okay. Someone comes in, the population growth comes in. Someone comes in, say they come from India, okay? They come from India on a temporary work visa, and they have a job. It's a low-paying job, but guess what? They got a work visa. They're going to go into RBC, and RBC is going to say, here you go, Mr. New Immigrant. Here's your bank account. And a couple months later, they're going to say, here you go, Mr. New Immigrant. Here's your nice new credit card.
Mm-hmm.
Just 29% interest.
That's all.
And so it's like
And don't forget cell phones, utilities, and other things they buy.
all of it. The big companies are not just making money. Like they're very, very good. And a lot of those services, they're like a lot of the big companies, it's like, okay, so look at the largest companies in Canada. It's like the Royal Bank.
Yeah.
Okay. So how are you going to operate without a bank account? How many people in Canada are operating without a bank account, without a credit card, without a line of credit, without a mortgage loan, without anything? Like it's rare. They're going to make money off of those people.
Oh, for sure.
A Shopify. Okay. Did you buy anything online?
Yeah, you probably used a Shopify
Platform.
store.
You don't know, but you probably did. Okay. Enbridge. It's like, okay. Did you pay your utility bill? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like these companies are very, very good at making money from everyone, rich, middle class, poor.